Hi, welcome back to this episode of Between Two Teachers. I'm Madeline Cronenberg.
And I'm Consuelo Lara.
And we are here on the 20th of November with our, still in pandemic times, still with our friend, Miss So-and-so right here, our teacher friend, who spent her time in pandemic times. And so I wanted to share what's the other part, the most important thing to say in the beginning of our time here with you is to acknowledge, as we always do, that we are coming to you from the sacred lands of the Chochenyo Karkin Ohlone people, to whom we owe everything for caring for this land as the many years that they did. And they were the first peoples on this land and on which our community lives and thrives. So we thank you to them and are hoping that more and more organizations and just groups of people acknowledge the ancestral tribes that lived on these lands before us and still do, still do.
Yeah.
So what's happening internationally in education is the coronavirus is in a gigantic surge this week in the United States and in Europe. But for the standpoint of education, in Europe, no one has closed their schools. No one at all. They are all in school. And the political leaders in Europe have used the term a mission, that they are on an education mission and that their government has a mission to keep their children in schools. And that's what they're doing, which doesn't mean that they're not, isolating folks and doing the test, the kinds of contact tracing, but they must be better at that than we have been, and certainly better at testing the schools staff and separating them out, doing that kind of thing, so that they've been able to keep them open. They have not had, massive spreads from their school staff. But that's not the case here in the United States. And so yesterday, or a couple of days ago, in New York City, where they have said that the rate that they look at as a danger rate is 3%. They hit 3%, and the next day they closed the schools. So 300,000 kids who were in the public schools went home. But here we get back to the disparity and inequities that we live with in our society. The private schools all stayed open.
Wow.
So they are marching on, and they are open. I have on our Trello board an interesting diagram that the New York City Public Schools put up, and they've got all of their schools mapped on a map, and they have a red dot or a blue dot on them, or no dot, just depending on whether or not they have had anyone in the building who's been exposed. And they have had them. They've had and they've had people originally they lost teachers and staff who died of COVID. Right, and they're a very big system, and they took the original biggest hit. But anyway, this map that they have on their website does show why they make the decisions that they made. And just for reopening in general, the other LA is still looking at it. They haven't reopened yet because now in California, we're pretty much all back into purple.
Yes, we are.
Right. So for right now, until I don't know when, maybe till January now, I'm thinking it's not going to change in November or December. We're in purple, so that means we're not eligible to even think of reopening schools. But the peculiar thing is, if you had already opened, you didn't have to close. That is odd to me, but that seems to be how they've set it up. And And once again, the private schools are open.
Yeah,
Private schools are open.
be interesting to see that if they have super spikes, are they still gonna stay open, or are they just leaving it up to the families, their choice? So that'll just be interesting.
It's all very interesting.
Yeah.
It is. But and then, this is stories will be written about these times for years and years and years. There's so many unusual things happening, and it's so unpredictable right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what's happening there. In California, the one other thing I did want to mention that's not connected to COVID is in Richmond this week. They had a presentation from the Community Needs Assessment Report, and they did a really deep dive into what kinds of needs children have. Because 2 years ago in Richmond, they began a journey to have some specific funding for children. And they passed measures E and K, which allow them to have that. And now they're starting to figure out how they want to spend the money that they're going to get allocated from this political measure that was passed. So they had a very long conversation. They've been talking a lot to the high school students. RISE is very connected to this. This is a local group, nonprofit, and RISE worked very hard to pass both E and K as well. So we'll talk about that here later as we figure out what it is they decide to do. And it's an important thing, because one of the big issues here is children are so underfunded in our country.
Yes.
Right. It's one of the main reasons that these other countries are able to, I think part of it that they're able to reopen their schools is they fund them.
Yeah.
They fund them. It's not unusual to have a nurse in every school. They already have that.
Yeah.
So the kinds of things that we don't come close to doing. They have universal child care. They have universal preschool. They have all of that. And we don't have any of that. But so we have to have a patchwork quilt of efforts. And this one in Richmond is a local part of that patchwork that's out there.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's that. And then the other thing I was going to just mention about the local board meeting. So you had 2 board meetings this week. One of them was to select the attributes that people would want in a new superintendent. And there's a very long and robust list of things that very difficult for any one person to be able to do any of these things. But honestly, when you look at job descriptions for superintendents, they're all very aspirational, right? They're very aspirational, and I'm sure that the one that gets put together here will be as well. So that the search for the superintendent is on, and the first part of that is to take a look at what people want in terms of the job description. Mm-hmm. So there was that. Mm-hmm. And then you had a very long meeting the next night, mm-hmm. A variety of topics, but one of them was the federal program monitoring, which, and I put the PowerPoint for that here, because that talks about, I just think it's interesting for folks to know that the federal government does check in on how you spend federal money, right? Title I money, Title II money, all of these monies that are earmarked for certain outcomes, they come back and look at how you've spent it and write a report. And that's what this is a report on how that money was spent. And criticisms and suggestions and plans to improve how it's being done, right?
Yeah, I think what it does, it's almost like a correction. It's, you can go back and say, oh, we got off the mark here, or we got, so let's just make it right and have a correction. And a lot of our people are new; they weren't here at the beginning, and
yeah, well, they didn't. That's the thing about these teams, is the team changes, so that you're talking about behaviors and things that happened the same children are not here, and the teachers are not here, and the other staff members are not here. So it's a
Yeah.
little,
So when you get that review, you say, okay, now we need to make an adjustment. But to have, like, the thing that bothers me is that people come up and say, see, we knew you were spending it wrong and you were, scapegoating and, gosh, it's just horrible, demonizing the district. That's the problem with it. But it's a process you have to go through every once in a while. And so they are going through it. So,
and people can learn from it.
yes.
I mean, whoever the new people whoever is here now is going to learn from it. And I think that's the way it has to be looked at, right? Because most of the people who are involved in it are not here, because people in education, especially at that level, just like superintendents, are in one place for a very short time, right? The average superintendent lasts 2 to 3 years in an urban setting.
Oh my gosh.
So there's that.
Okay.
Well, then you were going to talk about the meeting. Now, what were you going to talk about for the meeting?
Yeah, well, we said goodbye to Trustee Cuevas, so that was nice.
Sorry, you have another meeting, but she's not going to be able to attend the
Correct.
next meeting.
The old board has one more meeting, and that's December 2nd. And
But without Trustee Cuevas.
without Trustee Cuevas. And that'll be our last meeting, and I guess we do the switch or we go out and they come in. So that'll be wonderful. And you just don't know how thrilled I am to see these 4 people, the slate.
Oh,
People of integrity, competence, honesty. Oh my gosh, they are going to really push this.
they're going to be great.
I'm making them committed to, at least a decade stay. That's the one thing I learned from Mr. Cohen from Long Beach. He said that one of the things that was really important is that they had a stable board.
Right.
Your governance. So
Right.
you can't do anything without that, real stable board. I think our board's been so unstable. And I personally think our superintendent's done a good job, not because of the board, but in spite of the board. He's been able to do some accomplishments. So yes, we're making that change. And Lake is going to move forward, and they have been approved. So that was a good thing.
That was a great thing.
Oh yeah.
Right. They've waited a long time. And so now that's done.
That is such a story. So yeah, a few other things. The elections, I'm just really thrilled about that. And for the school district, it looks very positive. And for myself, I'm ahead a few points, a few votes.
Yes.
17, and there's another update this afternoon.
Yeah, that's it. That should be done they should be done this afternoon. We should know.
I hope so that's it.
Yes.
So that's what we're doing there. And what else? So that what that means is I would be going to the County Board of Education. So I just kind of want to share some things. Some people said, I voted for you. I really encouraged you, but what does the county board do? And because I taught in Pittsburgh, because I taught in Martinez, I knew very well what the County Board of Education did, and that we went there as teachers often, and that I also went there networking with other like ELD individuals from other districts, and we came together, and that was usually the place to meet. So it does a lot of things, and it does even more things than I knew about. Of course, it monitors budgets and approves budgets for school districts, and it listens to ideas of the community. And student achievement is still just a big priority. And it's about collaborating with other school districts and other school boards, school district boards, and advocating. That's the thing that I tend to do a lot of, advocating on important K-12 issues, policy issues for all students, for all the students. Right. And then, governing on, there's things like transfers of students. There's, they make the salary of the superintendent.
And sometimes they hire the superintendent, and
In
some counties they do, but not in Contra Costa.
Not in
Contra
this.
Costa, the superintendent, an interesting thing, the superintendent is herself or himself an elected official.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So it's a collaboration with that office. We also look at the courses of study for the juvenile schools. I think that's going to be very important, and for the community schools. And that's very important because our district, our area 1 that I'd be representing, has disproportionality when it comes to those students that are in those schools. And the big one is that the Board of Education, that the county takes action on charter school petitions and appeals from the districts. So that's where it goes, and that's where they go for those appeals. And that's very important for us to maintain a watchful eye on all of that, and that we are not rubber stamping any charters. So that to me is a big job there. And just making sure that I represent our community needs, area 1, at the county level. And I'm looking forward to networking with other board members and getting those best practices and sharing those. So, and I found the county so that's all boards do those things. At Contra Costa, I found their mission statement. It says the Contra Costa County Office of Education promotes success in learning and life through quality leadership programs and services. So I think that's very good. Issues that they are involved in, equity is also a big priority, and wellness. Right now, we need that more than ever.
That's really important.
Not just students, but employees, of course, our wellness, and improving schools. I like to hear that word improvement, because with so much bashing of our schools and our school districts, they don't say, and here's what I'm going to do to improve it. Never hear that. But in this role, I hope to do that quite a bit. And I have some of my own particular projects that I would like to see put forth that I'm interested in. I think I've talked about the building and construction trades education. We need to promote that, 7th through 12th grade. I think that's very important. Our full service community schools, especially at this time when our families need resources, we need to expand it. We have them, yes. We just need to expand them because that's what's going to help our families, both physical and mental health services. There's just so much trauma right now that we have to address. The things of culture and ethnicity, race. I've talked a lot about ethnic studies. There can be a network of ethnic studies teachers that maybe come from different districts and meet at the county office. But I'm also interested in integrating K through 12 integrated ethnic studies. What does that look like? I'm sure we could look at that and find some best practices. I also think it's important for us to expand our world languages programs in our schools. So that's something I'd like us to look at as well. And of course, charter schools. Now, this is a big thing that I want to bring in. I may bring it day 1, and that is a proposal for us to have a annual data report. This would be promoting transparency and accountability. And in this annual data report, it would have all of the financials about every single charter school in a county. So the county would be responsible for publishing that. Everybody wants transparency. So why not? And those are the kind of things, those about public schools. Why don't we know those about charter schools? So I'm going to definitely be proposing that as well. So I'll be busy.
Yes. So stay tuned here. You're going to hear a lot about that in next year. Come 2021.
2021, which is going to be a better year, a much better year.
It's going to be a much better year. This was a challenging year.
and our shout outs or?
Oh, well, before we get there, I actually want to give this a shout out to the, an interesting surprise to us all was that there is extra money this year. So I'm almost ready to give a shout out to the California spenders. But anyway, the state of California, as it turns out, is going to have some one-time money as a result of just how our revenue structure is set up. And California has had a lot of the winners in terms of COVID, and organizations and companies that were set up to support, especially technology companies, to support the entire national and international economy that is now having to do business from home. So there is a whole question now, a set of decisions that are going to have to be made up in Sacramento about how this windfall of extra funding, and they still don't know. It could be from 12 to $40 billion. That's what they say. That's a range there, and they haven't earmarked it for anything yet because they've only just realized that they're getting it.
Wow.
Right. So we'll see. So that's something to look forward to, and also just in terms of how the funding will play itself out.
Yeah.
I put two best practices in our little best practice section on Trello. One of them is from San Diego, the San Diego County charter criteria, and how they are looking at their charter schools now that 1505 has been passed. That's a law that said that they get to, they don't get, there's no rubber stamp the way there had been before. And so that a lot of different things can be considered when you're looking at a charter school, including not just the financial impact, but the impact on programs. So you can't come in anymore with a charter school that's going to duplicate a program already in the district, because all you're going to do is poach children from that program and dismantle it. So that was not true before. That type of protection was not there for the district families, but it is in the new charter law. So I have that information on here. Anybody who's interested in seeing how it's really playing out in board policies, and all of our charter school, all of our boards who have to make decisions around charter schools have to change their policies on how they do the decisions based on the new law.
Yep.
So that's a big deal. Another thing is, and I'm just going to, this was a best practice that I mentioned my son's school in Louisiana every once in a while. His school has a COVID dashboard on the front of their website so that everybody can see how many staff members or students have tested positive for COVID. And the consequence of that being how many children or staff members in any given site are quarantined, or has the site met the criteria to have to be closed. And there's no reason not to do that. So it really is no reason not to do it. If you're opening, and eventually we will open, or I don't know how California is going to play it out, but for anybody who is open, I think that makes the absolute most sense. So they have that. They also have, he has access to a mail-in test, where they mail him a test that he does the test at home, and he mails it into somebody, and the next day on an app, it tells him whether or not he's positive or negative.
Wow. Wow.
So that exists, but it is so uneven. Nobody in California is even talking about that.
You just reminded me, I was looking on my iPhone, there are apps, it's called COVID tracking or COVID, but they're the state, and California was not on it. Nevada has one, an app for
there are all these different, right.
So that,
and this has got to do with the fact we have no national leadership, right? And so everybody's left to their own devices, right? So we have different leadership, and we've talked about this here. We have different leadership from county to county, so that the schools in Alameda County have a lot more support around testing than the schools in Contra Costa County.
That's crazy.
Right? Just because the counties, it came down to that level.
Proportionality.
Yes, it's very peculiar, but that's where we are. I have another interesting little article in here for anybody who's interested in it, and how virtual learning forces teachers to think of new ways to present their lessons and what teachers have learned from from being virtual, and how that will play out when they're no longer virtual. And I think the other thing with virtual learning, when you were even talking about whole world languages, there are classes now that somebody could go into that you don't have to, you could take it virtually. So you could say, I'm going to take Arabic, I'm going to take it virtually, and have it be available countywide. Well, here is how you could come into the classroom and have lots of other things available to you. We really can look at ways to do that now.
Yes.
Right. Every high school doesn't have to offer Arabic, but it doesn't mean that every student in the county couldn't have access to Arabic.
Right.
Or any other language.
Exactly.
Right?
There's so many ways we can help that instructional process. We don't have to have teachers, on the brink of going, having nervous breakdowns. We can provide a lot more support in instruction, really.
Right.
To help them.
In a lot of different ways. I mean, we were speaking to somebody the other day who was saying how he's aware of a district in the South Bay where they are all back, and what they're doing is the students half of the students are in the classroom and half of the students are on Zoom, and so the teacher has to teach his or her lesson to who are you how do it's one thing to teach here and look at all of the students that you have assembled here, but meanwhile you've got all these children in your room.
Yeah.
And they didn't do this by giving you an extra person to teach with you.
Exactly.
They just said, now do it two different ways at the same time. And what this is doing is an enormous stress on the teachers.
Yes.
There's because you're being asked to do something that's impossible.
Job of two teachers right there. That's the job.
Right. And you're going to feel guilty. A good teacher wants everyone to be served, and they know they're not able to do it. So it's incredibly stressful.
Oh, yeah.
My other big shout out, I'll just do a shout out to the good old, the fine people of Oakland, because Oakland has come forward with their teacher housing program, and they've begun it at a place called Paloma Apartments. So I have the article on that. I've talked about that for a long time. I hope we get to have that happen here in West Contra Costa, and that expands throughout the state and the country for that matter. But it is happening, and again, in the first steps, but it is happening. Happened this week in Oakland at Paloma Apartments. Perfect. And then there is Mr. Mora Bitu.
Oh, yeah,
Bitu.
I noticed that one. Yeah. Well, one of the other things I talk a lot about are the expanding our school gardens to become community gardens. I'm hoping we do that. And I saw this article about there was somebody that was maintaining the garden at Kennedy High School. And I just thought it was just a community person that was going in there because, he was maintaining it and cleaning it and all of that. And I thought, well, that's so wonderful. And then it turns out, this person. And
I do. I remember him. He taught for 13 years at De Anza, and he's been at Kennedy for 10 years. He's an extraordinary teacher. He teaches special ed students. He teaches with such heart. He had his students, I posted the article from the Richmond Standard plus an older article that talked about how he had his students do powerlifting, and his students became champion powerlifters. Now this is being a creative teacher. I don't know what brought that into how it happened, but I do remember being in his classroom and seeing all of the materials, the newspaper clippings from all of his success up on the wall, and he would talk about how incredible that was for his students. He is an exceptional teacher, an exceptional person, and it's wonderful. He's 79, and he's the same age as Dr. Fauci, and he keeps on keeping on. Very high energy guy.
That's wonderful. And this is what makes our district so wonderful and so great and so those people that bash our district, it's just infuriating. These are who they're attacking, our wonderful committed heroes that we have in our district. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's the perfect one to end on as we go into Thanksgiving week, because
absolutely.
we should all be thankful for teachers like Mr. Morabito and community members. He is a dedicated community member.
Yep.
Which brings us to our chuckle from Carlos.
Okay, you ready for this one?
Ready.
Okay. Did you hear about the election in the mountains?
No.
It was a landslide.
Oh,
Where does he get
Carlos
them?
never fails. Carlos. And on that little election news, we will leave you for this week as we wait and see what happens between now and next week. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.